The world has been taken over by a brand new worldwide epidemic, a pandemic, the coronavirus. COVID-19, formerly known as 2019 novel coronavirus, is lashing out. It's shutting down entire countries. Schools and universities are closed, as are restaurants, community centres, theatres, gyms, and other public places. The fear of being infected is enormous. People are staying indoors. A large part of the world is on lockdown. What exactly is going on? How many people have died so far? Hundreds of thousands, as in the days of cholera? Millions, perhaps, as in the times of the Spanish flu? Worldwide, 15,000. That was the corona death toll on March 23, 2020. 15,000 people. That's not much for a pandemic. The virus has been active for almost 4 months. In 2018, between 60 and 80,000 people died of the flu in the US alone, in one winter. So why on earth is everybody talking about a pandemic? During my research, I discovered 10 different storylines. It's actually quite a complex case, but also quite suspenseful. I'll try to explain things clearly. First of all, COVID-19 does indeed exist. It is not a hoax, as some people believe. It's a flu virus that falls in the category of SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, which means it affects the lungs. COVID-19 makes you cough. It may also cause a runny nose and fever. This coronavirus causes the flu, an ordinary flu, as confirmed by more and more doctors worldwide. The chance that you will die from it is very small. Mostly old, sick and weakened people run the risk of dying from it. So why all the panic? That's because of storyline 2. The coronavirus started in Wuhan, a Chinese city with 11 million inhabitants. Patient 0, the first registered patient, caught the virus at an animal market, according to the official reports. And that's how the story emerged, that the virus had jumped from bat to man via a bowl of delicious yet infected bat soup. Now, whether or not this is a realistic explanation is yet to be seen. But at any rate, the epidemic started in Wuhan. The first images that reached us were quite innocent. People were simply wearing mouth caps. Life went on. People had lung problems anyway due to the heavily polluted air in Wuhan. But suddenly we started getting these images. That estranged me. When you have the flu with a fever, you stay at home, in bed or on the couch. But these people had gone out and they just dropped dead? Anyway, the Chinese Communist government showed the world to take well care of its people. In 10 days' time, they built a brand new hospital with 1,000 beds. A pretty impressive job. Now, before we continue with this hospital and this storyline, let's quickly jump to storyline number 3. In April 2018, Wuhan was appointed by the government to become a state-of-the-art 5G city. With the usual Chinese diligence, 3,000 macro stations and 27,000 micro stations were placed. 5G was going to contribute to a super-fast wireless communication. 2019 was the year of the 5G experiments, and in 2020, everything had to be up and running. In my own country, the Netherlands, Secretary of State for Economic Affairs and Climate, Mona Keizer, lectured us about 5G's infinite possibilities.
Bijvoorbeeld op het gebied van landbouwprecisie, om heel precies te weten op afstand wat er nodig is, bijvoorbeeld aan water of te veel of te weinig, of bijvoorbeeld gebruik van pesticiden, drones die gebruik gaan maken van die technologie, crowd control. We zijn met steeds meer mensen, dus het is ook van belang dat je bij grote evenementen op een snelle, adequate manier kunt reageren op incidenten.
From controlling the agricultural quota to crowd control, where insubordinates can be corrected immediately through facial recognition, think drones with cameras, 5G is the future, according to this enthused politician. Well, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are not that happy with 5G. Fact of the matter is, 5G was never properly tested on humans and animals. And the few experiments with these specific frequencies made cows go hysterical, made birds drop dead from the sky, and made people fall ill with flu-like symptoms. That's an interesting set of circumstances. Wuhan, corona flu, and 5G flu symptoms? Now, of course, this can all be a coincidence, but the skeptic in me became activated upon hearing this. Could it be that the coronavirus is used to wave off 5G complaints? No, madam, there's no way 5G can cause these symptoms. 5G is completely safe. You're simply infected with a coronavirus. No annoying citizens. No lawsuits or damage claims. Right, let's go back to the previous storyline. What exactly did happen in Wuhan? The following videos reached us. On January 30, the American Republican Thomas Cotton expressed his concern about the situation in China. The entire border with Russia is closed. Air traffic has been minimized. 16 million people have been quarantined. Schools are closed. Hong Kong has been cut off from the mainland. And he said, this coronavirus is a catastrophe on the scale of Chernobyl for China. Wow, that's huge! The Chinese whistleblower Miles Guo, who fled from China and now lives in the US, told an even more devastating tale. 250 million people are quarantined. 1.5 million people have been infected. 50,000 people have died. 1,200 people are cremated per day. All media are censored. All major cities are on lockdown. The entire industry is down. The US and the CIA are blamed, and the virus was man-made. He went on to talk about the new hospital and said, "Every window has metal bars. This is not an ordinary hospital, it's more like a prison. The doors are locked from the outside. The patients simply cannot leave." When I first heard him speak, I didn't realize that he was not talking about the coronavirus. Something entirely different was going on here. What exactly didn't occur to me until I read this report from the American Department of Justice. On January 28, the DOJ announced that Dr. Charles Lieber, the chair of Harvard's Chemistry and Chemical Biology Department, was arrested for giving fraudulent statements to the FBI. In 2011, Lieber became a strategic scientist at the Wuhan University of Technology in China. He received $1.5 million to set up a research lab in Wuhan, plus living expenses of $150,000, plus a monthly fee of $50,000 to attract, recruit, and cultivate high-level scientific talent for China's scientific development, economic prosperity, and national security. Dr. Lieber had concealed all of the above, and when the FBI confronted him, he denied everything. And so, on January 28, he was arrested and brought before the judge. What struck me most upon investigating this case was the Lieber Research Group that focuses on the research and development of nanoscale materials, nanoelectronics, and brain research. We're focusing on a novel approach for integrating electronics within the brain and other areas of the nervous system, the company states, thus trying to influence the cognitive functions and the behavior of people. Cognitive functions are all processes involved in the taking in and processing of information. Think, for instance, intelligence, memory, focus, concentration, speed of thinking, planning ability, social cognition, language skills, and problem-solving capabilities. And that is influenced by injecting nanoscale materials into our brains? Why does that make me think of 5G's crowd control? Then I read the statements of a man who claims to be a high-ranking military in the Chinese army. He described the horrific things he had witnessed in Wuhan's new prison-like hospital. He was deeply shocked and had decided to tell the world what he'd seen, just before the social media were taken over and shut down by the Chinese government. He wrote about the existence of a horrid bioweapon in Wuhan and other parts of China, killing millions of people. He made it very clear that he was not talking about the coronavirus. He was talking about a bioweapon. It was developed to suppress the Hong Kong protesters who had been roaming the streets since March 2019. The Hong Kong protests were peaceful. Millions of people were singing songs of peace, and they pleaded with the American president, Donald Trump, to support them in their efforts to gain more freedom. That was a thorn in the flesh of the Chinese government. It struck hard. Protesters were arrested and taken away in train wagons, not ever to return. Desperate families sent videos via Twitter and Facebook, begging other countries to intervene. The protests continued. The Chinese government ordered for the development of a bioweapon that would trigger a rapid development of Parkinson's disease among the Hong Kong protesters. Their cognitive functions would have to be diminished so they would no longer be a threat to the government. A rapid senile decay was its goal. However, this bioweapon turned out to do a lot more than that. The first experiments did show perfect senility, conform the plan, but it subsequently caused horrific psychoses, anxiety attacks that never stopped. And then organs started to dissolve, which resulted in a gruesome death after 3 horrible weeks. The kind of death you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. The Chinese government decided not to use the bioweapon. it was too destructive. Where was this weapon developed? At the Wuhan National Biosecurity Laboratory, a level 4 lab where the most dangerous killer viruses are researched and developed. You can probably guess what's coming next. The bioweapon was released by accident during a covert exchange at the Wuhan animal market by a corrupt lab employee who tried to sell the bioweapon for a massive amount of money to the American Secret Service, the CIA. Shots were fired and the killer bioweapon was released. Wuhan's inhabitants didn't stand a chance. They were doomed. In a desperate damage control attempt, the Chinese government shut down the entire country. According to our high-level whistleblower, the hospital was hell on earth with 3 departments. The first for those in senile decay, the second for those in psychosis, and a third for those who had died and were thrown into enormous furnaces to be instantly cremated, hoping the bioweapon would disappear in the flames. Is this horrid account true? Time will tell. For now, I deem it possible, bearing in mind the activities and Chinese connections of Dr. Charles Lieber. Right now, Wuhan is a ghost town with empty streets. People are locked up in their homes, their doors soldered shut. Another thing that seems to confirm the millions of casualties is the map showing extremely high SO2 emissions above Wuhan at the time of the catastrophe. SO2 is released upon the burning of organic material. Bodies? Was whistleblower Miles Guo right with his story about the crematoria that couldn't handle the amount of corpses? However gruesome, if true at all, please do realise that this has nothing to do with the coronavirus, our flu, our mild flu. For weeks, the World Health Organization and the United Nations told us there was no direct danger. You were only at risk when you were already old and sick. How on earth could this turn into a pandemic? This is shown in storyline 4. In order to understand number 4, I will briefly explain something about viruses. Some viruses only infect animals, such as ticks, cats and bats. Others infect human beings. Some viruses cannot jump from animal to human being. Those who can are called zoonoses. They have a specific receptor binding domain with which they can enter the human cell through the so-called ACE2 receptors. Now don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with jargon. That is not my intention with this documentary. I have asked medical doctors, virologists and DNA scientists several questions, and I will explain in a clear and simple manner what they told me. The official narrative that patient 0 was infected with COVID-19 by eating an infected bat is absolutely false. Why? Because the virus would, first of all, have to jump from bat to man, then it would have to reproduce and feed off human cell material, which is impossible for it's fully adjusted to bat cells, and then, step number 3, it has to become contagious. Those 3 steps do occur in nature, don't get me wrong, but it takes time. Especially step 2 is a problem. After all, the virus cannot survive without a host, in this case the bat. His entire protein sequence is attuned to bat cells. That's what the virus needs for food and for reproduction. Bat cells. When the virus jumps from bat to human, its problems are huge. First of all, it has to be able to enter the human cells. Then it has to get acquainted with its new host, the human being, so that it can actually eat his cells and start to multiply, after which it can become an irritating, contagious flu virus. This takes time, a lot of time. We're talking about the natural evolution of a virus. But that time wasn't there. COVID-19 was suddenly there, out of the blue. According to the officials, it jumped right out of a dead bat into a human being. And voila, there it was, highly effective and contagious. This is absolutely impossible, according to the experts I talked to. Then why are the World Health Organization and the United Nations spreading this insane tale? According to my professional sources, the virus must have been tampered with. Protein engineering, they called it. Not a naturally evolved virus, but an intentionally altered virus. To be precise, the protein sequence of this virus had been altered over a long period of time in human cells or in human guinea pigs. Was the discovery of patent number US 10-130-701-B2 granted to the British company Pirbright on November 20, 2018 for the development of a coronavirus, as posted on several social media, was that of any interest at all in this case? No. According to my sources, COVID-19 had nothing to do with that patent. And yet, Pirbright did provide a lead. Because of the wrong track of this patent, I stumbled upon Pirbright's financial benefactor, Bill Gates, our billionaire from my previous documentary about the fall of the cabal. Our great philanthropist, Bill Gates, well known for his vaccination program. When we look at his investments and thus his financial interests, it is clear that Bill Gates is everything but a philanthropist. He invested over $200 million in large pharmaceutical companies, giving him great financial interest in the production of vaccines and drugs. Let's take a look at the role of Bill Gates in the corona case. In February 2020, it was announced that Moderna, an American biotechnology concern, has started working on an experimental vaccine. Moderna is sponsored by the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, a worldwide alliance that finances and coordinates the development of vaccines. In order to make the corona vaccine as fast as possible, Moderna is now collaborating with Inovio Pharmaceuticals, Wistar, VGXI, a subsidiary of Gene One Life Science, and Twist Bioscience. What do all of these companies have in common? They are all financed by Bill Gates. Let's be honest, this man has a lot to gain from a pandemic. He reminds me of our own Dutch virologist, Ab Osterhaus, who provided the government of the Netherlands, Holland, with his so-called objective advice back in 2009 concerning the battle against the Mexican flu. When the first infected person was officially registered in the Netherlands, he and his co-workers toasted with whiskey on this memorable fact.
Dat we dit goed mogen aanpakken.
And following his advice, the Dutch government ordered 34 million Mexican flu vaccines, with the company in which Osterhaus had a 10% share.
Net na 12 uur gisteravond heeft VWS een order geplaatst voor 34 miljoen doses. Succes.
Follow the money. Let's hand it to them. It's a brilliant concept. There's a problem, you come up with a solution. The problem is a virus, you come up with a vaccine. The greater the problem, the greater your profit. And why not exaggerate the problem a bit? Use your connections at the WHO and the UN to spread a highly overrated message of fear into the world via the mainstream media, where you have lucrative connections as well, and the big bucks come rolling in. And if there is no virus to work with, you create one. COVID-19. You understand what storyline 4 is all about, right? The depopulation program that was so beautifully outlined in Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 by the hand of Henry Kissinger. The special program in which the world population has to be brought back from 7 billion to max 500 million people, all in the name of sustainability and saving planet Earth. And our friend Bill Gates openly assists in reaching this goal by means of his vaccination program.
The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Oh, and you're going to love this one. In 2019, Netflix broadcast a series about the creation of a universal vaccine. Pandemic: How to Prevent an Outbreak. Who financed the series? Bill Gates. Who played a role star? Bill Gates. Also in 2019, in October, Event 201 took place in New York. Guess what was simulated at the event? The outbreak of a coronavirus. Believe it or not, just before the actual outbreak a few weeks later. Who financed Event 201? Bill Gates. And it gets even crazier. Event 201 was not the first corona exercise. On September 18, at Tianhe Airport in Wuhan, there was an exercise around the alleged infection of a passenger with the coronavirus. To practice. For what? For something they knew darn well was going to happen? Either Bill Gates and his friends are extremely psychic, or they know more than you and me. I bet on the latter, at least for now. Oh, and there's yet another thing about Bill Gates that not many people are aware of. He is the financial force behind the World Health Organization, set up in 1948 by the Rockefellers, the extremely powerful family that I put in the limelight in part 2 of my documentary about the fall of the cabal. The WHO, that most people believe to be an objective organization for the benefit of all of humanity, floats on the dollars of Bill Gates and his charity organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So who do you think is behind the plans and their execution of the World Health Organization? Follow the money and everything becomes crystal clear. Now here's a nice little sideline before we continue with storyline number 5. The more I studied Bill Gates, the more he fascinated me. How could a computer nerd, after all he'd started off with a small computer business that in no time grew into the multi-billion-dollar concern Microsoft, how could this post-student suddenly end up on the front page of Forbes with that much money and that much power? Did he come from an ordinary family? While making my previous documentary, my intuition had led me to the real identity of Pizza Place owner James Alefantis, to the almighty Rothschild family. Could Bill Gates be a Rothschild as well? Or, even more likely, a Rockefeller? Bill's father, William Henry Gates, was an attorney. He sat on the board of Planned Parenthood. His mother, Mary Maxwell, was a successful businesswoman. Her family tree turned out to be important. Her grandfather, James Maxwell, was a wealthy banker. Not exactly an average American working-class family, I'd say. Now watch this. Bill Gates' 9th great-grandfather, in other words 12 generations back in time, was Stephen Gifford. This gentleman had 2 children, Hannah and Samuel Gifford. Hannah's family line leads us 10 generations down the line to Bill Gates, while Samuel Gifford's family line takes us 7 generations into the future to none other than Nelson Rockefeller, the 41st Vice President of the US. They belong to the same family. The Rockefellers, whose tentacles of power reach deep in every medical branch, from universities to the FDA, and our Microsoft Bill Gates, all come from the same nest. And not only that, when you go all the way back to the 20th great-grandfather of Bill Gates, which is 23 generations back in time, once again on his mother's side, we end up in the 13th century with John Lestrange V. There we see the fork in his family tree that leads us 21 generations into the future to none other than the Queen of Great Britain. She knighted her distant descendant in 2005 for his contribution to the world of business and charity. Now, many people will say, sure, if you go back in history that far, we're probably all related to each other and to the Queen of England. But I can assure you that is not the case. I invite you to study genealogy. My family tree can be traced all the way back to the 17th century, and there's not a drop of royal blood, nor am I related to Bill Gates. So, Bill Gates is not just anybody. He was born in a full-blood cabal family and grew up with only one goal: to take his place in Henry Kissinger's depopulation program. From the moment he was born, his destination was set in stone. He was to become the face of the vaccines. Vaccines that we know contain mercury, a heavy metal that is stored in our brains where it causes Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. Vaccines that caused incredible misery in countries such as India. Vaccines that were made as a solution to a problem that had been created in the first place by the same people of power and money, the Gates/Rockefellers. Vaccines that were created by supposedly independent pharmaceutical companies, each and every one of which were financed by the Gates/Rockefellers. Do you see a pattern emerge? The corona flu virus was made and turned loose on the world. It's a common flu, but it was used by the cabal as their trump card. No pun intended. A pandemic! The mainstream media are shouting off the rooftops non-stop. Newspapers write about nothing else. Governments emphasize the importance of washing our hands, of quarantine, mouth caps, and the closure of country borders. One person mentions something about toilet paper and everybody runs to the supermarket to stock up toilet paper. Interesting choice, by the way, as COVID-19 does not cause diarrhea. The people are so easily manipulated, it's scary. Fear has taken over. No one seems to be able to think logically anymore. The mind, too, seems to be on lockdown. Henry Kissinger said it loud and clear. It won't be long before we're all force vaccinated. I wonder what else will be in those vaccines, apart from mercury. Why do I think about Dr. Lieber's nanotechnology? Remember? The cognitive influences? The behavioral influences? Ooh, thanks, but no thanks. I promised you 10 storylines, and we're still stuck at number 5. And I'm not even counting Bill Gates' family tree. Number 6, plain and simple. Thanks to the corona precautions, we are no longer allowed to meet up with more than 100 people. This was announced on March 14, and it is shown as such in the Dutch version of this documentary that was published first. Only 10 days later, on March 24, the Dutch government announced that this number had gone down from 100 to 3. It is now prohibited to celebrate your birthday with more than 3 people in the room. It's prohibited to walk on the beach. It's prohibited to approach a person at a distance less than 1.5 meters. If you get any closer than 1.5 meters, you can be fined €400 on site. All events and gatherings have been cancelled, including my lectures and presentations, until the 1st of June. Exceptions? Funerals and church weddings. What else? Mayors have the right to have you quarantined at their command. Which part of police state don't you understand? And hey, in all fairness, this is a great solution for any government worried about the yellow vests, protesting farmers, and other insubordinates. And come on, it's for your own good. Number 7. The lockdown of China and other countries have enormous economic consequences. Businesses are shut down, production, supply. Many companies are driven to bankruptcy. Stock continues to decline. Oil prices are plunging. Even cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are plummeting. The mainstream media are screaming of a stock market crash. Shares are sold in a panic. Once again, a great advantage for the cabal. Donald Trump will be blamed for this misery. Guaranteed. The cabal will do anything to prevent him from being re-elected. An economic drama is most welcome. The fact that Trump had actually revived the American economy with, among others, the creation of 6.5 million new jobs will soon be forgotten. Storyline number 8. And this is where we get to an interesting twist in our story. Believe it or not, the coronavirus can also be regarded a blessing in disguise. I will explain. I believe that the entire negative corona story was created by the cabal to influence the presidential elections, so that Trump would disappear off the stage and they would regain power and control, going back to their new world order. However, the so-called white hats, the good guys, seem to have taken over, and that was something the cabal had not counted on. The financial economic crisis will turn out to have many advantages. How long have we been waiting for a financial reset? For a new monetary system? Do you really think this can be implemented without a struggle? Of course not. It will take a shock wave. The once so powerful cabal, the elite, the 1% I exposed in a 3-hour documentary is being destroyed as we speak, bit by bit. Corruption, money laundering by governments and politicians through their non-governmental organizations, high treason by selling national security secrets, and even 20% of the US radioactive uranium to Russia. See Part 9 of The Fall of the Cabal about the Rosatom deal of Obama and the Clintons. Everything is coming to light. Human trafficking, child sex trafficking. They're draining the swamp. A financial reset will follow. Guaranteed. The first signs are already there in the US. People are allowed to delay the down payment of their mortgage due to the coronavirus. That's never happened before. Interest rates have gone down to zero. The utterly corrupt Federal Reserve is now being restructured by Trump. And following the Fed, all central banks will bear the consequences, including the European Bank, the Bank for International Settlements, and the International Monetary Fund. The German National Bank is bankrupt. Other banks will follow soon. This may come across as scary, especially when you have a lot of money in the bank. But it's absolutely necessary to come to a new financial system. Only then can equal distribution arise. Only then can the abundance that we live in this world flow towards the 99% instead of the pockets of the 1%. Income tax will disappear. Value-added tax will be adjusted. Everybody will profit except the cabal. Storyline 9. Operation Defender 20. The biggest military exercise since 25 years. 30,000 American soldiers have arrived in 7 European countries. Tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians from those countries are standby to support them. In what? An exercise? The funny thing is, these soldiers don't wear mouth caps and they have no problems crossing the closed borders. What are we looking at? Furthermore, we heard the news that quite a few high-placed officials have been infected with the coronavirus. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's wife now has COVID-19. Her husband decided to self-quarantine. Queen Elizabeth fled Buckingham Palace for fear of the coronavirus. What a strange decision. I thought a palace would be a rather safe place. Our Dutch king Willem-Alexander and his wife Maxima will be tested for the virus, as they came in contact with infected people. Hollywood is another place where COVID-19 rules. Top actors such as Tom Hanks, his wife Rita Wilson, Orlando Bloom, Katy Perry, Ellen DeGeneres, even Harvey Weinstein in prison. They are all down with the virus. Hollywood has gone dark. Hollywood, one of the worst pedophile dens in the world, where child actors are molested on a daily basis, where satanic sacrifice rituals are commonplace. Hollywood is down? Main suspects in the nauseating Pizzagate scandal are being quarantined? Or should we read house arrests instead of quarantine? Or simply arrests? Are we looking at the mass arrests that the QAnons have been waiting for so long? COVID-19 furthermore seems to have a preference for ministers, top athletes and CEOs. In short, it seems to have a preference for people with a 6-figure salary, which of course is completely normal. All of a sudden, 60 Italian priests have died of COVID-19. Remember Trump's statement about child sex offenders? Fast trials, death penalty. Let's move on to our final storyline. In Wuhan, China, adrenochrome is produced. Remember from my previous documentary? The blood that the cabal drinks to feed on and uses as life elixir is produced in and sold from Wuhan, the city where the coronavirus emerged. Could it be that this adrenochrome has been infected intentionally with this virus by the White Hats? Or with something else? Something more lethal? To bring down the cabal? Have the cabal virus victims really been infected with COVID-19? Have the priests really died from it? Or were they executed for their pedophilic crimes? Is the entire corona infection nothing but a distraction for the public? At this moment in time, I cannot wait any longer with the presentation of my research findings. All my lectures in March, April and May have been cancelled. By means of this documentary, I can still share my current findings with the world. What do I expect to happen? That which millions of QAnons have been yearning for over 2 years. Mass arrests, military tribunals, convictions at the highest level, financial reset, and perhaps the 10 days of darkness Q mentioned. Lockdown of countries, lockdown of the internet, no social media, so that the cabal no longer knows what's coming and they cannot coordinate a possible escape. When this happens, do not be afraid. Everything is going according to plan. Operation Defender 20 is there to protect citizens against their corrupt governments that will spare no one in a final attempt to remain in power. I would not be surprised at all if we're told pretty soon that we cannot leave our homes any longer. My advice? Comply. In public places, idiots can open fire. At home, you're safe. Have a great time with your family. Enjoy your spring garden, the daffodils and the tulips, the beautiful singing of the birds. Everything will go on, just on a smaller scale. Q said, done in 30. If that means 30 days, this exciting phase will end on Good Friday, April 10. Realize that this is a unique time in the history of mankind. The time when the suppression of the people that has been going on for thousands of years will come to an end. This is the liberation of the people. This is the transition to a new earth, the 1,000-year kingdom of peace, the new Jerusalem on earth, as described in all ancient sacred texts. You are witnessing it, so enjoy to the fullest. There will be a time where you can say to your grandchildren, I was there, I lived it. God, it was so suspenseful. We had no idea what a wonderful world was awaiting us. Where we go one, we go all.